After studying this module, you shall be able to understand and define what is human intelligence. You will also understand the historical perspective of intelligence with different theories of intelligence, and in the end we will understand the role of neurocognition and human intelligence. The moment we talk about intelligent people, Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking and Steve Jobs basically come to our mind most frequently, and these are the names which basically triggers our mind. But how do we consider these people as intelligent? What do we actually understand by human intelligence? How did the concept of intelligence basically came into being? What did people infer from intelligence at the historical times? What are the different theories through which we can better understand what is the concept of intelligence? Also, what is the significant role of neurocognitions in human intelligence? With the help of various examples, we will understand the concept of intelligence in its emergence, theories and role of neurocognitions out here. Now, what do we mean by human intelligence? For more than a century, many of the psychologists and researchers have been trying to formulate the most agreeable definitions of human intelligence, but in vain. In our discussions, we will also dwell on following definitions given by American psychologist David Wechsler. Intelligence is the aggregate or global capacity of an individual to act purposefully, to think rationally, and to deal effectively with his environment. Let's consider an example wherein Sarah has to complete a school assignment which is to be submitted the next day, and her computer is not working. In such situation, rather than crying over her assignment, can we say Sarah is intelligent? Yes, because she thought rationally and acted purposefully to solve her problem. She also dealt effectively with her environment. Thus, intelligence is basically majorly about cognitive processes and which involves problem solving using higher order mental processes and memory. Now, intelligence is an ability to basically process by each human being but differs from person to person. These individual differences are what attracts researchers to study about it. Thus, the concept of intelligence majorly focuses on two areas: individual differences in intelligence and assessments of intelligence. As we have studied about these two areas in the previous modules, now we will move backward in the historical times and focus on how this concept emerged. Theories of human intelligence will help us in understanding this concept in a much better way. As we studied in the previous sections, that human intelligence cannot be defined to only merely verbal mental competencies, but also the non-verbal cues are also attended out here. Wechsler emphasized the intelligence to be a group of two distinct but related mental abilities. But what does a layman understand of these verbal and non-verbal competencies? To broaden the nature and understanding of intelligence, various theories have been developed by the psychologists about which we would be reading which I would be explaining you in these sections. First is the Spearman's two-factor theory. Charles Edward Spearman in 1945 was an English psychologist who basically advocated the two-factor theory in 1927. In his theory, he stated that intelligence consists of basically two factors, namely the G factor and the S factor. He described G factor as basically the general intelligence, and which basically refers to your overall score obtained in the intelligence test. Spearman used this statistical technique of factor analysis to identify different clusters under which lie the highly correlating behaviors, and thus defined the specific mental abilities further on. For instance, Anna and Peter took an intelligence test which consisted of 20 items, having 10 verbal and 10 mathematical reasoning based items. Both of them answered 80% of the items correctly and hence have the same level of general intelligence. However, when analyzed closely, it was found that Anna answered 100% of the mathematical reasoning items correctly and 75% of the verbal reasoning items correctly. On the other hand, Peter was found to answer 75% of mathematical reasoning correct and 100% of the verbal reasoning items correctly. Thus, even if Anna and Peter have same level of general intelligence, they don't possess some specific mental abilities. Anna clearly has a higher ability on the domain of mathematical reasoning and Peter has higher reasoning or verbal capacity. Thurston and specific mental abilities. Thurston 1887 to 1955 was a pioneer in the field of psychophysics and psychometrics. He proposed the multi-factor theory, defining or denying the importance of general intelligence, as he believed that it minimizes the importance of specific abilities, which basically constitutes the human intelligence. Like Spearman, Thurston also used factor analysis to identify 7 specific mental abilities by forming clusters. These abilities were basically verbal comprehension, which includes the ability to read, define and basically understand the words. Number, the ability to basically apply arithmetic operations and to understand and solve arithmetic problems. Then is the word fluency, the ability to basically produce word fluency. Then is spatial visualizations, the ability to mentally visualize objects. It could be your 3D objects out here. Associative memory, the ability to basically associate unrelated items and the skill of memorizing and recalling. Inductive reasoning, the ability to basically identify the problems and the rules and reason the solution well. Last but not the least is your perceptual speed, the ability to perceive the similarities and differences of the objects out here. Next theory is your Cattell and Horn's theory. Raymond Cattell in 1905 till 1998 proposed a theory of structure of intelligence in 1941, which was received and extended by John L. Horn in 1929 till 2006 in 1965. Cattell and Horn used the statistical technique of factor analysis to basically break down Spearman's G factor and identified 2 major factors of intelligence, which they named as crystallized intelligence and also as fluid intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is also termed as GC, whereas fluid intelligence is termed as GF. Now let's come and understand what is crystallized intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is basically defined as the ability to use previously acquired knowledge to solve your current problems and deal with his or her environment effectively. For example, Ram was given a mathematical problem by her tuition teacher to be solved within half an hour. He used to formulate learned in the previous class to solve the given problem. Thus, he used his crystallized intelligence for solving this kind of a problem. Fluid intelligence is basically defined as an ability to reason or solve current problems by producing novel and innovative ideas. So this part of intelligence doesn't require any previous learned knowledge or information to deal with the current situations. For example, it was the use of their fluid intelligence, that is creative thinking, which led the Wright brothers to the inventions of aeroplane. Thus, fluid intelligence simply means the ability to think differently and uniquely. Fourth theory out here is your Carroll's 3-stratum model, and he proposed this model of intelligence in 1993, in which he gave 3 layers of intelligence. It was based on by researchers around the world between the years 1935 to 1980. This model basically consists of the contents of all the 3 Spearman's, Thurston's and Cattell-Horn's theory. The 3 layers of stratum of cognitive ability, this model consists of 3 general, broad and narrow set in a hierarchical manner or in a hierarchy. General, which is the stratum 3. The topmost layer consists of the G factor, which is believed to underlie most of the cognitive activities. Broad, which is stratum 2. The second layer basically consists of the 8 broad cognitive factors arranged in descending order from left to right in terms of the extent to which they are influenced by the G factor. Fluid intelligence is most strongly influenced and processing speed is the least influenced by G. Narrow, which is the stratum 1, the bottommost layers consist of almost 70 highly specific abilities that are correlated with the second stratum factors. They reflect the common G factor. At the top, Carroll believed that his model provided a complete and in-depth map of human cognitive abilities derived with the help of psychometric approach. Fifth theory is the Sternberg's triarchic theory. Robert Jeffrey Sternberg is an American cognitive psychologist who expressed a much wider view of intelligence. He proposed a theory in 1986 in which he defined the psychological processes that influence intellectual behavior and also defined diverse forms of intelligence. This theory basically consists of 3 forms of intelligence, and the 3 forms underlying psychological processes that it's named triarchic theory of intelligence. The processes that basically underlie intelligent behavior are divided into 3 specific components. First is the meta components. These are the higher order components used to explain out a task performance, execute and regulate it. They include cognitive skills such as identifying a problem, formulating a hypothesis, planning out strategies, testing them and even evaluating feedback of the performance. For example, Meera was stuck in a stressful problem of how to complete all her work and enjoy with friends at the same time in the coming week. Hence, to deal with this problem, she used her problem-solving skill to plan out a schedule for the whole week so that she could balance both work as well as friends. Performance components. These are the mental processes used during the task performance. They include perceptual processing, retrieving schemes from long-term memory and generating responses. For example, on the first morning of the week, Meera received her schedule for the day, which she had planned earlier and created a do-a list in her mind to carry out with earlier and carry on with her tasks during the day. Thus, she used her performance components for the execution of the planned schedule. Knowledge acquisition components. These are the components which help us to learn from our previous experiences, store the information derived from it in the memory and combine new informations with the previously acquired information. These abilities cause the individual differences which exist in the crystallized intelligence. For example, Meera successfully completed her work and also enjoyed with her friends during the week she had planned for. But she was again struck in similar situations a few months later where she had to balance both her work and as well as her family. But as she had learned from the previous experience, this time she immediately planned a schedule for the week and was able to deal effectively with the situation. This theory identified or defined 3 forms of intelligence that Sternberg believed existed. First is analytical intelligence. It involves the problem-solving skills which are basically academically oriented and are measured by traditional intelligence tests. Second is your practical intelligence. It involves the skills required to cope with the problems and challenges of day-to-day life and the ability to meet with the daily contextual demands. And third is your creative intelligence. It basically involves the skills to creatively adapt with and to solve the novel problems. It involves the ability to produce innovative solutions altogether. Now, the 6th theory which we would be discussing out here would be Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. Howard Gardner is a strong believer of the concept that intelligence is much more than just mental competence and that intelligence consists of relatively independent intelligences that fulfill various demands to adapt with the environment. Thus, he advanced the theory of multiple intelligence in 1983, in which he identified 8 distinct varieties of adaptive abilities and a possible 9th variety. The 8 intellectual abilities are, as we discussed them, first is the linguistic intelligence. It is the ability to basically use your words to express your feelings. It could be, example would be speakers and journalists use their linguistic intelligence to basically express the viewpoint in front of people. Second would be bodily kinesthetic intelligence. It is the ability to basically control the movements of your body and manipulate the objects in a skillful manner. And who all would be examples out here would be your doctors, use their body kinesthetic intelligence to conduct surgeries. Third would be the visuospatial intelligence out here. It is the ability to visualize objects. It could be 3D, 2D, 4D objects mentally and solve the spatial problems. So, the professionals who would be dealing with this kind of intelligence would be our architects who would be laying out construction plans of buildings. Fourth would be your musical intelligence. It is the ability to perceive and understand pitch, tone, melody and rhythm and produce music. So, singers use this kind of a musical intelligence to produce and sing songs. Logical mathematical intelligence is the fifth one. It is the ability to reason mathematically and logically solve arithmetic operations, and people who would be using this would be mathematicians who would use the mathematical intelligence to basically reason logically, to solve problems and to derive theorems. Sixth would be your interpersonal intelligence. It is basically the ability to understand and connect and relate well to other people. Example, mental health professionals such as your psychiatrist use their interpersonal intelligence to basically understand their patients and to help them to improve their conditions. Seventh is your intrapersonal intelligence. It is basically ability to understand oneself. Example, a 40-year-old working woman, Priya, uses his interpersonal intelligence to understand herself and her needs, which makes it easier for her to live peacefully and even satisfactorily. Naturalistic intelligence is the eighth one. It is the ability to understand the mechanisms of nature. Example, natural intelligence would be people who would be using is the people who are assigned or which we say that zoologist would be the one who would be understanding this kind of intelligence. Gardner also gave a ninth possible kind of a variety of intelligence, which is your existential intelligence. Now, what is existential intelligence? Philosophically oriented ability, which is used to find answers to the questions about the meanings of one's existence, life and death. Seventh is the Mayer-Salovey-Caruso structure of emotional intelligence. Another form of adaptive intelligence is your emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to perceive others' emotions accurately, to respond to those emotions appropriately, to understand one's own emotions and also to regulate and control one's own emotional responses. Psychologists John Mayer, Peter Salovey and David Caruso advanced the theory of the structure of emotional intelligence, and they had named this theory as Mayer-Salovey-Caruso structure of emotional intelligence. This theory basically states that emotional intelligence consists of 4 components or compartments. These components would be first the perceiving component or perceiving emotions. It consists of measuring people's ability to perceive others' emotional expressions and even understand these expressions. For example, in photographs as well as in emotional meaning conveyed by different landscapes. Second would be using emotions to facilitate thoughts. It consists of measuring people's ability to basically identify emotions and accordingly facilitate their own thoughts in order to deal effectively with other people or situations. For example, a girl finds her friend weeping and immediately processes her thoughts that she is required to console her friend. Thus, she is good at using emotions to basically facilitate the thoughts. Understanding third is the understanding emotions. It consists of measuring people's ability to be aware of one's own emotions and understand them. People who are well aware of how, when and their emotions change in intensity or type, they're good at understanding emotions of their own as well as even of others also. Fourth is managing emotions. It consists of measuring people's ability to manage and control one's own emotions and of others as well. It is important to manage one's own emotions to maintain harmony, peace and achieve personal success and control. For example, a manager is required to basically manage his own well as his subordinates' emotions in order to work in harmony and achieve goals successfully. Therefore, we can say that it is to evaluate a person's emotional intelligence out here. Next topic would be the neurocognitions in intelligence. So far we have studied about what human intelligence means, its historical viewpoints and the modern theories which are described or which are there for understanding the nature and structures of human intelligence. Now let's study the role of neurocognitions in the field of intelligence. But before that, let's understand what is the meaning of neurocognitive psychology. A neurocognitive psychology is a branch of psychology which basically studies about the neurocognitive functions, which are the cognitive functions that are associated with the neural pathways of the brain or specific brain areas. It studies about the influence of these functions on the psychological behavior of the person. In simple words, it is a study of the impact of the brain functions and the behavioral patterns of the person. So what role does neurocognition plays in intelligence? It is a field of neurocognition basically plays a significant role on intelligence as it addresses various biological factors to measure intelligence. These distinct biological factors would be head size correlates to the brain volume. As we have read, the historical perspective of intelligence believed that the size of the head defined the volume of the brain and thus intelligence. However, significant findings have revealed that not the size of the brain but several other properties of the brain may define your intelligence. These properties which are expected to define intelligence include number of neurons in the brain, the efficiency of the process of myelin sheaths and the number of creases of the brain. Next would be your information processing speed. The structuralist view of psychology measured the intelligence by measuring the reaction time. It attempted to find out how quickly does the brain process and react to information it receives from the sensory stimuli. Thus, information processing speed is basically correlated with your traditional intelligence test. Brain electrical activity in the brain is significantly correlated to the intelligence test scores. This electrical activity is basically studied by field of neuroscience to identify its relationship with the cognitive abilities. These activities basically include the process in which sensory information is received by the neurotransmitters in the neuron and transferred by them to the other receiving dendrites. The speed of this transfer is studied by neurocognitive psychology to identify its relationship with intelligence. Energy consumption in the brain is another point where various researches basically conducted by the neuroscientists have revealed that the neurons consume energy just like other body cells do. They have further found out that the brains consume and break down glucose at a fast pace when it is performing any cognitive activity by its choice, whereas it consumes less glucose when it is performing any cognitive activity that is assigned to it. Intelligent people thus utilize extensive brain power and in effective ways. Now we have discussed everything which was there in this module. So let's have a recap of what all we have done with the summary. Intelligence is the aggregate or global capacity of the individual to act purposefully, to think rationally and to basically deal effectively with our environment. Psychologists and researchers have also developed theories to basically determine and explain in detail the structure of intelligence, namely Spearman's two-factor theory, Thurston's specific mental abilities, crystallized and fluid intelligence, three-stratum model, Sternberg's triachic theory, Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence, and even the model of emotional intelligence. We have also seen the role of neurocognitions and we have seen that various studies and researchers made this field reveal that the biological factors of brain and electrical activities taking place inside the brain also reflects the intelligence of a person.